Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Cadre Concept. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with your host, as always, Shane McGraw in the Gun Show. Shane McGraw in the Gun Show. Shane McGraw in the hip-hop rodeo.
That's right. Were you a hip-hop guy, Chris?
I was not.
You ever West Coast gangster or what?
I was a garage grunge band guy. I'm a Smashing Pumpkins, Portland kind of guy, you know. Depeche Mode if I get really dark, but you know.
I really like that. I went through a season of that too. I have a tattoo on my back of Godsmack's son.
Get out of here.
Yeah, big old.
No way.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, do you have? I gotta know though. Do you wear like chains or medallions or any hip hop paraphernalia at all? Is there any?
I think that I was never too cool. I was never cool enough to like bring my gold chains in.
I do got to tell you, dude, in high school, I went to Lincoln High School, which was like, you know, the North Face, like soccer playing school of our district. But I came in and wearing overalls with one strap undone and
it's crisscross.
Yeah, and I got made fun of, so I didn't do it anymore. But
right.
I think I wanted to embrace the hip hop lifestyle. It wasn't I felt embarrassed because people.
As a kid, I thought it'd be cool to try to bring the ponytail. Just the one strand of hair down the back of your head.
Oh, the rat tail type of deal?
The rat tail.
Oh,
I thought I was going to bring that, to school in the real way. Yeah, they pulled on it a lot, and they called it mean things, and I was very not okay with it.
Oh, my God.
They called it a fag tag back then.
Oh, no.
Fag tag? And I'm like, I'm not a man. I did not like it.
Kids are so mean. Dude, that actually is a perfect segue. I mean, last episode we talked about, we ended with you were talking about not doing a year of not being offended.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, whether it's overalls or rat tails or whatever, there's a lot of places in life, in childhood and adulthood, where we can get offended and just destroy. And as kids, I think we just give up on things. And as adults, I think we can like destroy things, piss me off too much and I'll like blow it up.
Yeah, the destroy thing is the thing. I think we should talk about that because I think we're not a very loyal culture. We're not a very enduring culture. We're very much of a throwaway microwave culture. Yeah. Especially when it comes to people, which is, if you know anything about business, like if you ever want to the number one determining factor for being a failure at business is not learning how to work with people. Guaranteed. Like you show me someone who just can't seem to get right, and I'll show you someone with poor people skills or poor social intelligence. I can relate to it. I can relate to it.
What's that?
I've ruined a lot of relationships in my time because of poor social intelligence. I mean, and I'll ruin more because it's a true mastery process that you work on your whole life on how to be in relationships. So our challenge, when you're challenged, never be offended. How would someone go about, walking their path, having people sin against them, hurt them, go out of their way to hurt them? Because that happens. Hurt people, right?
Yeah. And are hurt by them. Yes.
And are hurt by them. Yeah. So if that's happening, how do you never be offended by it? How do you be in a relationship where someone takes and never gives and not be offended?
How do you do
that?
I mean, that's your challenge. I'm not sure I've signed up for this challenge, but it's your challenge. How are you? And I'm sure, when did you make that commitment? When were you like, this is what I'm going to do? Was it January 1? I'm
kind of like you in the sense that I came up with the idea, but I'm like, that's really hard to do. So I've been like doing a social experiment because it's too hard to commit to it and put it in public. But for about a month, I've been working on it really intelligently, really, really trying to think about, okay, there was a trigger. I got offended. Why am I offended? And I'm just doing basically what I'm doing, Chris. This is a science experiment.
Right.
We're all going to be offended for the rest of our life. There's nothing we can do because we're selfish beings and we think it's about us. It's not. Right. And the first rule of Cadre is it's not about you. It's not about you. The more you think it is, the more you're lost. So how do you not be offended and what are the frameworks of it? So the first thing I learned is learning your triggers of being offended. Remember, every one of us are from different walks of life. Every one of us had different stories. We had good dads and bad dads, good moms and bad moms. We had neglection, we had pain, we had hurt, we had triumphs and victories, we had religion, we had locality. There's all these things that make us who we are. So what offends you will maybe not necessarily offend me, even if we were raised 5 streets apart.
Right.
It's because we have different dynamics. So what is at the root of being offended? It's selfishness. I believe that. I believe if I'm offended, I've chose to make the story about me.
Right. Yeah.
So that's rule number 1 is it about you? And what are the triggers where you make it about you and you become offended? So here's the things I've come up with, and maybe you can speak to them, Chris. In fact, I'd love you to, is if I'm offended and I have a trigger, how do I look for the opportunity to see a trigger and realize it tactically, not emotionally? Like, have you ever heard that making decisions emotionally is the dumbest thing you can do? I'm offended because you emotionally upset me. So now I'm going to be offended. I'm going to punch you because that's how I'm going to establish my level of offendedness.
Right.
Well, I think offendedness is a word, by the way.
I like it. I think we're going to add it if it's not already there.
Yeah, it's there. Maybe we can make a rap about it. Or a long song. I mean, there's a song called Glysterine.
Yeah, man. Karaoke. I've done that.
And it's a good one. It's a good one.
It is a good one.
So triggers. What is a trigger that would cause you to make you think it's about you? So here's what I believe the biggest trigger points are. It's the 7F areas. If someone comes at you about your marriage, it's an area of defense. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to threaten the integrity of my marriage. I'm offended. Fitness. Hey, you kind of look a little big boned. Or I'm going to pass you over because you're not as pretty as the next person. I'm offended that I didn't get picked. I'm offended that I didn't fit in. Sports, fun activities. Like, I'm offended I was picked last in dodgeball.
I'm offended I wasn't invited. You didn't invite me to your picnic. Yep.
I'm offended that I gave you something or did something for you that you didn't give it back. Like, why would you not? I mean, don't you understand? I expected something when I gave you something. It's about me. Remember, I really didn't give it to you. I actually gave it to you so I'd get something. Like, those are triggers. The 7 Fs, every one of those critical components of your life that make up your story, those are each individually compartments of your life. And each one of those have triggers inside of them that will dictate if you're offended. And so what happens? What's a side effect of being offended, Chris? I think offended could work in a positive way too. I'm so offended by you that I'm going to overcome. You can't tell me I can't do something. I'm going to charge that mountain because you said I can. I'm offended that you didn't believe in me.
Yeah. I do think that can still backfire. Whether your way to cope with the trigger is to blow things up or to just prove them wrong, right? One way or the other, you can go negative or you can go positive. But either way, it's a pattern in your life that makes that. Sometimes you can be so determined, like, well, I'm going to show you that you just went down an entire road of life for first you make a choice, then the choice makes you. You just committed yourself to 5 years of some path out of I'm going to show you. And it may not have even been the path you wanted to go, but because you're going to prove them wrong, right? Because you were offended and you might have all sorts of results and all sorts of production around it, but you get 5 years down the road and you put your ladder up against the wrong wall and you're like, dude, I did not mean to do this. Why did I do this? Well, because you got triggered. And then you let that trigger become so about you that you went down a 3-year path about you and you never wanted to be there. So these triggers are real. Yeah. And I think that we should identify first that there's a trigger point based on a hole in your game in each of the 7 areas. Yeah. And then what we do is we manifest those holes into being offended. So like my hole could be, let's see, how can I be vulnerable here? I want to share true stuff with you guys. One of the things about this podcast is I'm going to dress the way I'm going to dress. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to act the way I'm going to act. I'm not going to put on a show for anybody. Every time I've tried to be the best version of someone else that I could be, it's backfired. And it's because I think I'm the center of the story. So I would rather wear what I want to wear and just be like, yeah, that's me. And try not to give into the idea that I'm trying to fit into the mold that you want me to fit into. Yeah. So anybody in this podcast that's listening on a regular basis, don't try to be me. Use the nuggets that I give you to be the best version of you so that you can have authentic relationships with others. Because if you are not authentic on your own, you won't have authentic relationships with others because you're selling a false product. I'll repeat that. If you're not authentic with yourself, you can't be authentic with others because the product you're selling is false. And guess what? People know almost instantly if you're selling bullshit. They do. People buy the person, not the product. So if you're selling anything and you listen to this, recognize that your ability to be authentic and true to yourself is more important to the person on the other side of the table than your knowledge set. I've been in relationships where I'm like, look, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I need you to give me all your money. And here's what I believe I can do. Here's my plan. Here's all the stuff that I've done. If you're willing to go on this journey with me and be in like a beta or just try this out with me, it would be amazing. And they're like, you know what? I believe in you. Yeah. I'm like, you're really going to give me money when you don't even know if I'm good at it? Yeah, man, that's the power of authenticity. That's sort of a side note, but I guess it's connected, but I think, authenticity, it's instinctual. It's primal. Like we will give people money without even knowing if they're good at something if we feel like we trust them. Right. And the only way to get that trust is by having the authenticity.
I don't care that you have blemishes. I just don't want you to try to hide them.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And Chris, if you have a hole in your game, cool. Maybe I'm good at that area and we work better together because I'm strong when you're weak. It's not so much that you got it all figured out, because that's a lie.
I think, dude, I think that's the
False
part of,
product.
like, when we make it about ourselves, I think that's the part that makes it hard, because we feel like we have to be, that's part of, I think, our culture, or how our culture has evolved, is like with social media, we see everybody else's perfect game. And so,
Right.
so then we were like, I got to have a perfect game. And so then all this inauthenticity starts to pile up. And in the middle of all that, we're afraid of being offended. We're afraid of somebody judging us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we hedge, we protect against triggers. So then we actually don't play a game, you know, like there's this whole swirl of stuff that's intertwined,
good.
You know?
So would you say that like a part of not being offended is, so there's a fear/pride component to it, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you said, fear, because I'm so afraid of failing or being judged or being measured or falling short that I don't do anything.
Yeah.
So then I sit in a cocoon and no one hates me, no one likes me, but I haven't put my product, like your company's called Groundswell. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love about the Groundswell is there's no way a groundswell happens ever unless you have an authentic delivery, because it'll peter out. You know, because it starts with something that echoes and gets bigger, right? That's how a groundswell works. It's, you throw a rock in a pond and it starts with a splash and then it echoes and it covers the whole pond. Well, if it's not authentic, it'll peter out. So if you're wondering why your business peters out, it's probably because you're offended so often that you're not the best. You're not you. Yeah. You're bouncing around based on your emotional response to everybody around you, trying to figure out how to be who you are instead of just being who you are. Yeah. I know it sounds totally like hold hands and skip and la la la, but I have been ultra successful. Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell you that on the other side of ultra successful is nothing if it's not authentic. Because you have to keep the ruse of being non-authentic to stay effective. Yeah, dude, that's cancerous. That spills into all areas of life. Like I just know, because I've done it. I've bought, and I'm more of a bottler. So what'll happen for me is if I'm offended and I get a trigger, some people will blow up, and I'm like an internal hurricane. I'm not an external hurricane. I'll like hold it in, and on the outside things look good, right? Yeah. But then I'll churn on it. And story after story will develop and build in my head to where like, I'll play with you the way I want to play with you, but I don't trust you. And so I just kind of hang on to things in here. And it's why, and by the way, that story snowballs. And so why did that happen? Because there was a trigger that offended me, and it had nothing to do with them. It had to do with my own ego and the story I told about me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, well said, Chris. Yeah. You know, I've actually we've been working together for a while now, and I've seen you do that. I've seen you hunker down, and I think to myself like, oh, now that I recognize it, I'm able to go, hey, Chris, can we talk about that thing that you're feeling? Like, I mean, I'm willing to receive it if you're willing to give it to me. And then what I find is me and you start, and then we end pretty good because we're, you know, in my opinion, we're being authentic. And I think with authenticity, we can go forward. Yeah. But if you're still holding back something, or if I'm holding back something, or if I'm taking it offensive, then I can't hear your story. Yeah. If I offended you, I should say sorry. Yeah. Because perception is reality. Whether or not I meant to or not has nothing to do with it. If you're offended, you're offended. I mean, in our day and age today, come on. Yeah. Like, we have more reasons to be offended than ever. We have men that are becoming women that are becoming men. We have opposite sex marriages. We have all things that are testing the fabric of our society. And everybody's running around being offended. I'm offended that you decided to love a man. Now, I don't necessarily always agree with that. That's not my thing. But I'm not going to be offended at that person, because I'm going to love the person. Right. I don't have to agree with the activity, but I'm going to love the person, period. But what they do in their own room is their own thing, right? Yeah, right. That's a ridiculous waste of energy to get offended by. Well, I can say this intellectually. It's a ridiculous waste of energy to get offended by anything. There's no power in that. There's no power in being offended. You don't sit on your throne of power in a place of being offended. You now become the victim to somebody else's whatever. It's an isolation mechanism. At the end of the day, I don't deserve to be amongst others. That's what it ultimately is. Offending is they don't deserve to be next to me. It's a coping mechanism to make sure your narrative stays true. Okay, so first thing is recognizing that being offended is a weakness, and it's something that we want to notice when it's happening and curb it before it becomes bigger. Like you were saying, you allow it to become bigger. Well, what if you could catch it when it's happening, see a trigger, and have a response that got you out of it? Yep. So I grew up kind of emotionally screwed up. And so when I got married, one of the things I was committed to is I wanted to go to counseling right away and learn how to be a husband, because I didn't know how. I never saw a real relationship that I wanted to emulate.
Yeah.
So, and I really hadn't. And I looked for it. So I went to this counselor, and one of the things that she taught me was I used to use anger and big words and loud words and, you know, a groundswell of frustration to win my arguments, or to get my wife to receive my way of thinking. And then I would feel not only oftentimes I'd be right with what I wanted to talk about, but the way I delivered it made it so wrong that whatever I was going to talk about didn't have any value.
Right.
So my counselor gave me this stupid phrase that I hated at the time, but now it's like my go-to for everything. She said, when you catch yourself, the trigger, going into this spiral where you're going to, you know, act a fool. For me, it was anger, but forgiveness, I think, or being offended is the same. She said, stop and ask the person, your wife, if you can have a do-over. And then she looked at my wife and said, if he says he wants a do-over, you better stop, quit being offended, and say absolutely, and forget yesterday, forget the last moment, and start new. If you guys can do that, you'll figure this out. And so I would literally be like, I'm so freaking pissed off, acting like a stupid ass, because that's what I was. And then I would recognize it, because we all have that little voice that says, Shane, you're not being the best version of yourself. And I had to swallow my pride and go, can I please have a do-over?
That's good.
And then she'd go, yes, you may. And I'm like, thank you very much. And then I'd be like, what I was trying to say is I didn't appreciate this. Like, I remember one time I got really, really mad because she got a speeding ticket. And I swear to God, by the end of the conversation, you would have thought I got the speeding ticket and it was all my fault, and I was the one who was a burden to her. And I was like, how did I create that?
Yeah.
You know, like, what a horrible leadership model for me as a husband. So I think the first thing is accepting a trigger. And the second thing is knowing that the trigger's there, and then having a response to the trigger so that you don't go too far down this hole.
Yeah. You got to have pattern. That counselor gave you a pattern interrupt. I mean, you got to have something that breaks
pattern interrupt.
Yeah. You got to break whatever, because it is a pattern. Like, I mean, I think when we dive into it, what you'll see is, and I know you've seen this, and but it's always the trigger happens, and then your pattern that you've had since you were a kid kicks in, right? From one of mine is like, I don't want to do that. You can't make me do that. It's going to hurt to do that. I don't know how to do that. Like, there's all the things, and then poof, I dig my heels in. There's resistance. It doesn't matter what it is, but if I feel like it's something I don't want to do, bam, the trigger happens, the story kicks in, and then I don't do it. You know, and it's the same thing. It's a pattern.
The story kicks in, and then you don't do it. So how do we take that particular thing? Maybe, are you willing to be subjective in this?
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing happens, your story that you've been running over and over in your head, you know, it's taking a different shape, but you got a story, a self. It's usually like self-preservation.
Right, totally that,
Right?
Yep.
So when that happens and they have that trigger, what's a way that you can navigate yourself out of it without being offended? Like, how can you recover quicker?
Yeah, for me, I just did this morning. I was looking at something that I was going through an exercise. It asked me to commit to some action in 48 hours. And as soon as I was fine with the exercise, and I got to what are you willing to do the next 48 hours about it? And I was like, whoa. And I felt it was, I could feel it. I've done enough of the work where, like, now I can feel it. I was like, brakes came on, and I was like, well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed it. I actually could, like, separate and see it. Like, I noticed it looking down, and I'm like, oh. So I went and did some work on that, and I'm like, oh, dude, I had this thing, like, if you ask me to do something that I'm not sure how to do it, or if I want to do it, or if I think it's going to hurt to do it, or whatever it is, I'm like, I don't want to play. And so then I make this story. I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this my whole life. Do your homework. I don't want to do it. It's going to hurt to do it. I don't know how to do it. Like, go do sprints. I don't want to do it. It's going to hurt to do it. I don't know how, like, oh my God, this thing is running my life.
The hard work is, you're afraid of it sometimes because you're afraid.
Dude, the funny thing is, like, on this side of it, like, what I want as a man, as a business owner, as a human who knows himself as a powerful person, is to produce a result. I go, here's the result I want to produce, and I'm going to go do the work to produce it. But this story in the background is, I will go produce a result if the work required to produce the result doesn't make me uncomfortable.
There we go.
The minute you're asking me to commit to something that I feel is going to hurt to do it, I don't know how to do it, I don't want to do it. Other
people might not approve, or you might fail, or whatever.
brakes come on and I don't do it. So that's
I
the
think,
pattern.
I think we have to, okay. So the trigger, and then we associate the trigger with a pattern and with observation. Okay. We recognize it. We can, like you said, you can see it now, and then you got to do something about it.
Right.
So here's my rule. And, I'd love to hear your response, but I give myself I have like a no whiner, just like thing. Yeah. So there's majors and minor things. There's small things I need to get over right now. Yep. And then there's some things that hurt enough where it's challenging this guy. And I have a thing where I get to whine about it today. I get to think about it. I get to, wrestle through it. But tomorrow morning, I'm the best version of myself. So I would write this down, because this is, I think, in my opinion, a lot of people will say to me, Shane, what is it that makes you so resilient? And I think it's this one practice. Without humbly, I tell you that this has done a lot for me. Yeah. Every morning I wake up a brand new man with a new set of tools in my tool bag, whether or not they're earned the good way or the bad way, the lessons. I wake up a fresh new man of God. I'm a new creation. I can start over. Everything yesterday that I did wrong is now in the past, and only in the present is what I get to deal with. I can't control that. Right. And then I get to go and have a new day. And I literally, like, if me and my wife are fighting, I will wake up in the morning and I'll say to myself, God, I love her. And I'll make myself remember that I love when it's hard, because it helps me be better. That's it. And then I'll go to my day that maybe my job is tough, or maybe I got a meeting. Just because it happened yesterday doesn't mean I don't have to deal with the consequence today. Right. Right. But today I'm more prepared, and I'm more subjective, and I'm more back to my authentic self, to where I can navigate this thing with a new set of tools. I don't have to be unprepared like I was yesterday, because I got to learn those lessons that I get to use today. Does that make sense? Yeah, man. Totally. I think that was what I was going to say. For the thing, for me, the answer was to just come up with a new story. Like, the old story is, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. It's going to hurt to do it. The new story, and if you can actually start to get different angles of stories, like that, like, you go to bed, you wake up the next day, you're like, man, I love that woman, right? Like, you just create a new story. And if you can create enough space between the upset, the offense, the trigger, and your emotions, create space between the trigger and your emotions, it gives you space to, like you said in the beginning, strategically just see it differently. Yeah. And you create a new story. I think inside a new story, you can have a new reality. Well, you are the sum of your activities and your disciplines, right? So if your activity and discipline is, I'm going to be offended, I'm going to harbor this, I'm going to bury it in me, I'm going to lash out. Yeah. And what ends up happening is, you look a month down the road, a year down the road, whatever you want to look at, and you're like, that guy was angry, he lashed out, he was offended. Like, that's his body of work, because those are his disciplines. So if it's like someone punches you in the face, Jesus says, if they strike you, turn your other cheek. He's not saying, please have them hit you repetitively. He's saying, have the resiliency inside of yourself to recognize that through their pain, they struck you, so you don't have to match their pain with your own. You get to brush it off and say, I didn't like that, but I can, I'm not going to allow you to bring out in me the same anger that you have. Right. You don't have that control over me. Well, and for me, it's like, no one has that control over me other than my faith. That's my, that's my wall where I protect myself, and that's who I get to be. And I don't have to let you define me. I already have someone defining me. I already have my own wrestling match. I don't need to add more people's garbage to mine. Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's close it with this, Chris. I'm still working on this, as you can tell. I couldn't give you a playbook. Yeah. I couldn't. Here's your 5 steps to figuring this out. But what I am learning is that, and I think you nailed it. I think the crux of this whole thing is what you just said. When the thing happens, there's an emotional response, and you have to serve the time to get through the emotional response to get to the tactical or the strategic or the, you said a different word. I was thinking tactical. You said, oh, strategic maybe. Yeah. I think you said like logical, or like more like thought through. Sure. Yeah. So I think the first thing you got to do is figuring out how not to make a decision or make an action associated to that feeling that you have at the moment. So when the trigger happens, you go, oh, this is a moment where normally I would put my foot right in my mouth, or I would dig my hole, or I would have my negative thing. Right. Me, I speak out. You don't speak. You pull back. Same. You're not better than me. I'm not better than you. It's the same exact coping mechanism. It's just going in the opposite directions, but it's still equally as hurtful for others as it is for ourselves, right? My wife is a lot like you. If I offend her, she'll go, okay, you don't get to talk to me no more. I'm going to separate myself from you. And now I've removed your permission to make me feel that way.
Right.
And then I'm like, no, you don't get to remove yourself from me. So I think the first thing is accepting the trigger, then giving yourself a period. And I'm just wrapping this as I go, but not making the response out of the same feeling that exists with the offended piece. Like you got to separate. Like
create space between.
Yeah. And then once you get past the emotional response and get to the tactical response or and then I would ask myself a question. So I think this is the Cadre concept coming back in is have you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad? I'm sorry. How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He has this thing where he says, and I'm going to botch it, but he says, if you two were like them, and if you two grew up like them, and if you two had the day they had or the experience they had this morning, you two may behave just the same way they do, if not worse. So it's kind of like making allowances for people to be human.
Right.
So when someone offends you and you retaliate from the same level of frustration, you're basically saying, hey, let's dance in this hole together.
Right.
Or you can create space, and then your response could be like, hey, yesterday you seemed off. I found myself taking offense to what you said, but rather than responding, I want to understand, are you okay? What caused you to say that? What did I do that caused that? And then you may find that it had nothing to do with you, that it was an internal thing, or it could have been something small that you could handle it while it's small instead of it getting big.
Right. Yeah.
Does that sound like a fair takeaway?
Yes. I love this because I feel like, again, back to the cadre concept, in order to build a cadre, look, you're going to have to be in relationship with people, and people are going to hurt you. You're going to be offended by people because even by your own wife, even by your own spouse, your own partner, you can be offended. I can be offended every week by my own spouse, right? That's just human nature. But it's usually not about them. It's about your own stuff, my own patterns, my own stories that got offended and bruised. But to make the cadre work, I think this skill of learning how to not get offended and to move through it to the other side is I think it's critical.
I'm a guy who has I have a lot of staff that work for me or work with me, however you want to put it. And what I learned is, understanding this as a leader, it makes leadership, you can either struggle every day and have the leadership be the hardest part of your life, because the only way to get things done in this world is to work together. It's the only real way to grow. So if you have a team that you're in charge of leading, my advice to you is stop trying to lead them and start serving them. Because in the process of serving someone, what happens is if you humor me here, I really believe in this, but I don't know how to say it without sounding super cheesy. At least it feels that way because it's so hard. But I think if you're doing a takeaway for this podcast, I would say, the best way to not be offended is to recognize that it's not about you. And then the way you turn that realization into action is, if it's not about you, then who's it about? Well, it's about, working in harmony with others. So if you create a story, like you were saying, a narrative, a response that, how am I serving this person? It becomes much easier to seek understanding. Why tell what you can ask? You may think they're a jerk. So instead of saying, hey, you were a jerk, you could say, yesterday, it seemed like you were kind of a jerk. What was up? So instead of telling them they were a jerk, you can say, why were you a jerk? And then you might find out, you can come from, so serving people is really hard because most of the time it's not about you talking, it's about you listening. So the cadre concept, if you want to be in relationship with all these people, and you want to be successful, you have to make them successful by helping them win what's the matters of their heart. Like Chris, one of the things, and if you're listening to this podcast, my buddy Chris here, he has a company called Groundswell, and he like me is still putting it together. He's been doing it for a long time. He knows he has a lot of tools in his tool bag, and he's trying to figure out how to put it up in a real specific way to where he can plug people into it and genuinely impact their life. And so he's narrowing his focus, and he's getting real specific, and he's getting better. And right now he has a gift for doing what he's doing right here. This ability to have conversation with people and ask good questions and get people to share their story is his gift. And he's figured out how to become a person that helps people take their story and tell the world. So if you're listening to this thing and you want to tell your story, you might call Chris, because Chris's goal is to help people take their groundswell, their moment, their skill or thing, and then magnify it with taking it to the people. And then he helps people do that. He helps me do that. I think when you have a servant heart and you're about how can I help other people's win, you'll find that you rarely ever eat alone. You rarely ever don't have someone who wants to return the favor. You very rarely don't have an opportunity to present itself, because people like to work with people they know, they like, and they trust. And how do people know, like, and trust you? You spend the time to know, like, and trust them.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for that. And this is so good. This is the kind of, like, this isn't something you just learn in a book. This is something that you learn by being in relationship and community with people. I think that's what you're building in the Cadre Concept, right? Is you're not just teaching people how to build a cadre, you're actually giving them an environment in which to have a cadre. Yes.
Yeah. I was on this podcast, like a video blog about a week ago, and he asked me this question, like, how can you add all these things to your plate? And I said, well, I look at it different. All these things are my conduits to do the Cadre Concept.
Yeah.
So all I'm doing is just serving people and figuring out how to surround myself with people who have talents and skills and help them win the game they're playing, so that, and I too get to win alongside them. And then I get to do more. Like, I have a lot of companies and a lot of people that work for me and a lot of stuff that I'm building. But if I approach that, there's no way I could do any of those things by myself.
Right.
So I spend all my time trying to figure out how to serve others.
Yeah.
Because the better I serve them, the better they serve me. And yes, they hurt. Yes, I get hurt. People do leave. People do take and then not give. But I've learned to have a thicker skin and recognize that's part of the game you play. If it was all about what you get in return, then you'd be measuring the wrong things.
So good. Well, Shane, if people want to reach out to you and kind of learn more about not just the Cadre Concept, but also how do they begin to create a cadre, jump into your cadre, like whatever the opportunities are, where do people go to connect with you?
You can obviously always go to Cadre Concept. You can find us on social media platforms. Just look up our name, and then you can go to our website. I would say the best way to start your cadre right now, if you're going to do me a solid and the rest of the day, the world a solid, I would start with your family.
It's good. It's good, man.
Make healing, forgiveness, say sorry, build a bridge to healing, call your mom. I had to call my mom this morning. Wasn't a very good son about a month ago, and had to call my mom. Took me a month to do it, but I called my mom. So call your dad, call your mom. In our test that we have in the Cadre Concept, that test that we refer, we ask some of those questions. Are you being a good child or son? All right.
I think we covered that last episode. So you guys go to the cadreconcept.com. You guys can actually take that assessment, those questions.
Yep.
Shane, good stuff, man. I always love talking to you. I think you have a lot to share. I love the wisdom that you're sharing. Thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable by sharing as you put it all together. So until next time, buddy, take care.
All right. Talk to you soon.